The sky over the city was a heavy, solid gray. It was the kind of afternoon that makes people want to stay indoors, wrapping themselves in blankets and turning on the television to escape the gloom. But life in a busy city doesn't stop just because the weather is bad. The streets were still packed with people rushing from one place to another, their heads down, their umbrellas bumping into one another. Everyone was in a hurry, focused entirely on their own problems, their own jobs, and their own destinations. In the middle of all this noise and movement, one man was walking at his own pace. It was Keanu Reeves. He wasn't walking with a big group of bodyguards or a security team clearing the path for him. He didn't have a fancy car waiting for him on the corner with a driver holding the door. He was just wearing a simple dark jacket, a pair of jeans, and boots that had clearly seen a lot of miles. To anyone passing by who didn't look twice, he looked like just another guy trying to get through the day without getting soaked. But if you looked closely, you could see the calmness in his eyes. Despite being one of the most famous actors in the world, known for huge action movies and millions of dollars, he moved through the crowd with a quiet energy. He seemed to enjoy the anonymity of the city, the chance to just be a regular person for a little while. As he walked along the wet pavement, the sound of car horns and distant sirens filling his ears, his eyes were scanning the street. He wasn't looking for paparazzi or fans who might recognize him. He was just observing the world around him. That's when something caught his attention. It wasn't a shop window or a bright sign advertising a sale. It was a figure sitting on the cold ground, tucked against the brick wall of an old building. It was an older man. He sat on a small wooden crate that looked like it had been pulled out of a trash heap nearby. He was huddled inside a jacket that was too big for him, trying to keep warm against the biting wind. In front of him, there was a piece of cardboard, soggy from the rain, with words written in black marker that were starting to fade away. Most people walked right past him. They would glance at him for a split second and then quickly look away, maybe feeling a moment of guilt but not stopping. They were too busy, or maybe they just didn't know what to do. The city can make you hard like that. Seeing people in need every single day can sometimes make you stop feeling anything because it hurts too much to care all the time. But Keanu stopped. He didn't just slow down, he actually came to a halt a few feet away from the man. He stood there, the rain dripping off the edge of his umbrella, looking at the person on the ground. What made him stop? It might have been the way the man was sitting, so still and quiet while the world rushed by him. Or it might have been the jacket. Underneath the layers of grime and wear, the jacket looked like a military field coat. It had patches on the shoulders that were hard to make out in the dim light, but the shape and the cut of it were unmistakable. It was the coat of a soldier. To Keanu, that detail changed everything. Seeing a homeless person is sad, but seeing a veteran sitting in the rain is something different. It's a sharp reminder that the people who fought for our safety often come home to find none for themselves. Keanu had a deep respect for that. He knew that this man, whoever he was, had once stood up for something, had once been strong enough to face danger, and now he was just trying to survive a rainy afternoon. The veteran looked up. He was used to people ignoring him, or looking at him with disgust, or crossing the street to avoid him. He expected the man in the dark jacket to keep walking, just like the 100 others before him. But their eyes met. There was a moment of silence there, right in the middle of the busy sidewalk. People had to swerve around them, shooting annoyed looks at the blockage, but Keanu didn't care. He was focused entirely on the man in front of him. The veteran looked tired. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, and his beard was gray and unkempt. But his eyes, though weary, still held a spark of life. They were the eyes of someone who had seen things he couldn't forget. He looked at Keanu and saw a stranger who was actually looking at him, not through him. That is a rare thing for someone living on the streets. To be seen is to be recognized as a human being again, rather than just a nuisance. Keanu took a step closer, closing the gap between them. He didn't say anything at first. He just waited. It was a sign of respect. He wasn't going to force his help on anyone, he was going to let the man decide if he wanted to talk. The rain kept falling, drumming a steady rhythm against the umbrellas and the roofs of the passing cars. The air smelled of wet pavement and exhaust fumes, but right there, between those two men, the world seemed to get a little quieter. The veteran shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but also grateful for it. He adjusted his grip on the small cardboard sign, maybe thinking that he needed to explain why he was there, or maybe thinking that this was his chance to ask for something. He looked down at his boots, which were falling apart, letting water soak into his socks. Then he looked back up at Keanu, ready to speak. The simple act of stopping had already broken the wall of loneliness that surrounded the veteran. It was a small gesture, but in a city of millions, it felt like a miracle. The story of what happened next was about to begin, but it all started with Keanu Reeves deciding that this man was worth his time. The rain kept coming down, harder now, drumming against the tops of the umbrellas passing by. The noise of the city seemed to fade away for the older man sitting on the wooden crate. All he could see was the pair of boots standing in front of him. They were wet, but they were sturdy. Slowly, he lifted his head. His neck felt stiff from the cold, and his eyes squinted against the gray light. When he looked up, he didn't see a random stranger or a busy commuter. He saw a face he recognized. It was a face that had been on movie posters, on billboards, and on television screens for decades. It took a moment for his mind to process it. Why would a movie star be standing on a wet sidewalk in the middle of the afternoon? Why would he be stopped in front of a homeless man? The veteran felt a sudden flush of heat rise to his cheeks, a sharp contrast to the freezing rain around him. He felt exposed. He pulled his ragged military jacket tighter around himself, trying to hide the stains and the tears in the fabric. He didn't want to be seen like this. He didn't want someone successful, someone clean and warm, to look at him in his lowest moment. He felt a deep sense of embarrassment, the kind that makes you want to disappear into the ground. But the man standing there didn't look away. He didn't scrunch up his nose in disgust or look at his watch like he was late for something important. He just stood there, waiting. He had a look of calm patience, as if he had all the time in the world. The veteran realized that this wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank for a TV show. The actor was actually waiting for him to speak. The older man cleared his throat. It felt like sandpaper rubbing together. He hadn't spoken to anyone properly in days. Usually, he just muttered thanks when someone dropped a coin in his cup without stopping. But this was different. He needed to find his voice. He looked into the actor's eyes and saw something surprising: curiosity and respect. There was no pity there, which was a relief. Pity can feel worse than hate sometimes because it makes you feel small. "Sir," the veteran croaked. His voice was raspy and low, roughened by years of smoking and sleeping in the cold air. I didn't mean to stop you." The actor shook his head slightly and smiled a tiny, warm smile. "You didn't stop me," he seemed to say with his body language. "I stopped myself." The veteran took a deep breath. He looked down at the cardboard sign lying near his feet. It was faded and hard to read, just like he felt. He didn't want to give a long speech. He didn't want to tell the sad story of how he lost his job, or how his injuries made it hard to work, or how the bills piled up until he lost his apartment. He didn't want to beg for thousands of dollars or ask for a miracle. He just wanted to be practical. He had been watching the people go in and out of the small cafe across the street for days. He knew their menu better than he knew his own pockets. "I'm hungry," the veteran said, his voice gaining a little strength. It was an honest admission, stripped of all emotion. Just a fact. He hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. He had survived on a granola bar he found in a trash can and some water from a public fountain, but his stomach was growling loud enough for him to hear over the traffic. "I haven't eaten in a while." He paused, gathering his dignity. It was important to him that he didn't sound like he was asking for a handout for nothing. He wanted to make it clear that he had a plan. He pointed a trembling finger toward the neon sign of the cafe across the street. The window was fogged up, but he could see the warm yellow light inside and the people sitting at tables with steaming mugs. "That place over there," he continued. "They have a deal. A special. If you have $1, you can get a small coffee and a day-old pastry. It's not much, but it's hot." The actor stayed quiet, listening intently. He didn't pull out his wallet. He didn't reach for his phone to send money. He just listened. The veteran went on, feeling a bit more confident because the other man was actually paying attention. "I don't want to put you out. I know you're busy. I see people walking past here every day, and nobody stops. But I'm just short. If I could get $1, just one single dollar, I could go over there and get warm. I could get something in my stomach." He looked the actor in the eye again. "I'm not asking for a fortune. I don't need a hotel room or a suit. I just need that $1 to get the special. It would really help." The request hung in the air between them. It was such a small thing. In a city where millions of dollars changed hands every day in glass towers high above their heads, here was a man asking for the smallest unit of money imaginable. He wasn't trying to scam anyone. He wasn't asking for money for alcohol or drugs. He literally just wanted a cup of cheap coffee and a sweet roll to take the edge off the hunger and the cold. Around him, the sidewalk traffic had slowed down slightly. People were starting to notice who was standing there. A young woman with a white umbrella stopped in her tracks, her eyes going wide. She nudged her friend, whispering. A guy in a business suit slowed down, staring openly. Phones started to come out of pockets, cameras pointed subtly in their direction. The famous actor and the homeless veteran were creating a small scene. The veteran noticed the attention and his shoulders tensed up. He hated being a spectacle. He felt the eyes of the crowd boring into him. He was used to being invisible, and being visible felt dangerous. He worried that the actor would feel pressured by the crowd, that he would just toss a $20 bill on the wet ground and walk away quickly to escape the scene. That would give the veteran money, yes, but it would make him feel like a charity case again. It would be a transaction, not a connection. But the actor didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the phones. He kept his eyes fixed on the older man. He seemed to understand the weight of the request. It wasn't really about the $1, it was about the fact that the man had calculated exactly what he needed to survive the next few hours. He had retained enough pride to ask for a specific amount, tied to a specific item, rather than just crying out for help. That was the spirit of a soldier, the actor thought. Even when you are down, you assess the situation, you identify the objective, and you ask for the support you need to achieve it. The veteran waited, his heart beating a little faster. He wondered what the result would be. He had asked many people for change before, but he had never asked a movie star for a specific dollar amount in the middle of a crowd. The air felt electric, charged with the anticipation of the people watching and the quiet desperation of the man sitting on the crate. The actor shifted his weight, and for a second, the veteran thought he was leaving. But instead, he leaned in closer, bridging the gap between their two very different worlds, ready to respond to the most modest request he had likely heard in years. The air between them seemed to stand still, even though the rain continued to fall heavily on the sidewalks around them. The veteran held his breath, waiting for a reaction. In his experience, people usually did one of two things when he spoke to them: they either ignored him completely and walked faster, or they fished a coin out of their pocket and dropped it into his cup without ever making eye contact. It was a transaction that left him feeling invisible, like a vending machine where you put in money and get good karma in return. But this situation was different. The man standing in front of him didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone watching. Keanu slowly lowered himself. He didn't just bend over slightly, he crouched down until he was looking the veteran directly in the eye. He rested his arms on his knees, bringing himself down to the same level as the man sitting on the crate. By doing this, he removed the power dynamic that usually exists between a rich celebrity and a poor person on the street. He was no longer looking down on the veteran, they were equals. The rain dripped off the brim of Keanu's cap, but he didn't seem to care. He was focused entirely on the person in front of him. Keanu's eyes drifted toward the jacket again. He leaned in a little closer, examining the faded patch on the shoulder. It was worn out, the threads were loose, and the colors had been washed out by years of sun and rain, but the shape was still distinct. It was a symbol of service, a mark of a time when this man had a purpose, a uniform, and a country that relied on him. "I noticed your coat," Keanu said quietly. His voice was calm and steady, cutting through the noise of the traffic. "You served." The veteran blinked. He wasn't used to people asking about him. They usually asked for directions, or asked him to move, but they never asked about his past. He felt a sudden lump in his throat. The shame of his current situation tried to push the words back down, but the respect in the actor's voice gave him the courage to answer. He straightened his back as much as he could while sitting on the crate. For a second, he wasn't a homeless beggar anymore. He was a soldier again. "Yes, sir," the veteran said, his voice losing some of its raspiness and gaining a bit of strength. "I did. 30 years ago. It feels like a different life." He looked down at his hands, which were rough and dirty. "I was overseas. Did a couple of tours. Came back, and, well, it wasn't easy to fit back in. The noise, the people. It got too loud sometimes." Keanu listened. He didn't interrupt, and he didn't offer advice. He didn't say things like "it gets better" or "you should try harder." He just listened with full attention. He understood that when someone shares their pain, the best thing you can do is be a witness to it. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the weight of what the man was saying. "Thank you," Keanu said softly. "For your service. And for what you went through." It wasn't a robotic phrase that people say just to be polite. You could hear the sincerity in his voice. It sounded like he genuinely meant it. The veteran looked up, surprised. He had heard "thank you for your service" plenty of times, usually from people walking past who didn't even stop. But hearing it now, while sitting face to face with someone who was actually listening, felt different. It felt like an honor. The crowd that had gathered was growing larger. People were whispering, holding up their phones, trying to capture the moment. But the two men acted as if they were in a bubble. The veteran looked at Keanu and realized that this actor wasn't looking at him with pity. He wasn't looking at him like a problem that needed to be fixed with money. He was looking at him like a human being who had dignity. That was when the realization hit Keanu. He understood the real meaning of the request for $1. This man wasn't just asking for coffee. He was testing his own humanity. He was asking, "Do I matter enough for you to stop by asking for such a small, specific amount?" The veteran was trying to keep his pride intact. He didn't want to be a burden. He just wanted to know that he was seen. The one was a bridge. It was a way to say, "I am still here, and I still have needs, just like anyone else." Keanu smiled again, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He saw the strength in the veteran. Despite losing his home, his money, and his comfort, the man hadn't lost his spirit. He was still fighting, in his own quiet way, to survive the day with his head held high. That resilience was impressive. It reminded Keanu of the characters he played in movies, people who face impossible odds but keep getting back up. Here was a real-life hero doing exactly that. "You asked for $1, Keanu said, breaking the silence gently. He looked over at the cafe across the street, then back at the veteran. "For the coffee and the special?" The veteran nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. That's all I need. Just a warm-up." Keanu didn't reach into his pocket to pull out a single dollar bill. He didn't even pull out a $100 bill to be generous. He did something better. He shook his head slightly, as if refusing to accept such a small transaction. "I'll tell you what," Keanu said. "I was just about to go get a coffee myself. I don't like drinking alone. And I definitely don't want to let a good soldier sit out here in the rain while I sit inside in the warm." The veteran's eyes widened. He started to shake his head. "Oh no, sir, I couldn't impose. I just needed the dollar. I can go in the back. I don't want to bother you." Keanu reached out a hand, stopping him gently. "You're not bothering me. You're doing me a favor, actually. I could use the company. It's a lonely day out here." The veteran looked into Keanu's eyes and saw that he wasn't joking. The actor wasn't doing this for the cameras or the publicity. He genuinely just wanted to share a table. The veteran felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was worth someone's time. He felt like he mattered. The one request had opened a door, and Keanu had kicked it wide open. The connection was made, not through money, but through mutual respect and a shared moment of humanity in the middle of a cold, uncaring city. The veteran hesitated for a moment, looking down at his dirty clothes and worn boots, then back at the warm light spilling out of the cafe door. He felt a wave of self-consciousness wash over him. He was used to sitting on the sidewalk, watching people enjoy their lives from behind a glass window. He wasn't used to walking through that door and sitting among them. He worried that the other customers would stare, or that the smell of the street would offend someone. But Keanu stood there with a patient smile, waiting for him to make the move. It wasn't a look of pressure, it was an invitation. With a deep breath, the veteran picked up his small crate, tucked it under his arm, and stood up. His legs felt stiff, but he followed Keanu toward the entrance. When they stepped inside, the atmosphere changed instantly. The noise of the traffic and the howling wind were cut off as the heavy glass door swung shut behind them. The air inside was thick with the smell of roasted coffee beans, cinnamon, and fresh bread. It was a warm, sweet smell that made the veteran's stomach rumble loudly. He flinched, hoping no one had heard, but Keanu just chuckled softly and guided him toward the counter. The cafe was bustling with people typing on laptops and chatting in small groups. As the two men walked in, heads started to turn. People recognized the famous actor immediately. Whispers spread like wildfire, and phones were suddenly raised to capture a video of the movie star ordering coffee. But Keanu acted like he was the only person in the room with his new friend. When they reached the counter, the young barista looked nervous and starstruck. She stammered a greeting, her eyes darting between the two men. Keanu didn't sign an autograph or pose for a picture. Instead, he turned to the veteran. "What would you like?" he asked. "You said they have a special for $1. The veteran looked at the menu board above the counter. The special was a small, black coffee and a dry muffin that hadn't sold that morning. It was enough to stop the hunger pangs, but it wasn't enjoyable. He started to point at it. "Yes, that one. The $1 deal is fine." Keanu shook his head firmly. "No," he said gently. "That's not going to work. You need something warm in your belly, not just caffeine." He turned to the barista. "We will take 2 large lattes, extra hot. And we will take 2 of your biggest breakfast sandwiches. The ones with the eggs, cheese, and bacon. And a bowl of the tomato soup, please. Make it to go, but we are going to eat here first." The veteran's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth to protest, to say that was too much food and too much money, but Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. It was a firm but friendly gesture that silenced him. "I insist," Keanu said. "And we are going to sit right over there." He pointed to a small, round table in the corner of the shop. It was away from the main crowd, offering a little privacy. They carried their trays over the veteran, walking carefully, terrified he might drop something, and sat down on the small wooden chairs. For a few minutes, they just sat there, letting the heat of the room seep into their bones. The veteran looked at the food in front of him. The steam was rising from the soup, and the smell of the bacon was incredible. He couldn't remember the last time he had a meal like this. He picked up the sandwich with trembling hands and took a bite. The taste exploded in his mouth. It was warm, savory, and real. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, trying to make it last. Across the table, Keanu ate his own sandwich, scrolling through his phone occasionally but mostly just enjoying the quiet company. He didn't ask prying questions. He didn't ask why the man was homeless or how he lost his family. He just talked about the rain, the city, and how good the coffee was. It was the most normal conversation the veteran had had in years. For that hour, he wasn't a homeless veteran. He was just a guy having coffee with a friend. As they finished eating, the veteran leaned back, feeling a sense of contentment that had been missing for a long time. The knot of hunger in his stomach was gone, replaced by a warm fullness. But he knew the moment was ending. He dreaded going back outside into the cold. He dreaded the reality that awaited him once he left this warm bubble. Keanu wiped his mouth with a napkin and signaled for the check. The server brought the bill, face down, on a small black tray. Keanu picked up the tray but didn't head for the register immediately. He looked at the veteran, his expression turning serious but kind. "You know," Keanu started, "everyone deserves a warm meal. It shouldn't be a luxury." He stood up and walked to the counter. The veteran watched, expecting him to pay for the sandwiches and come back. But Keanu spent a long time talking to the manager. He handed over a credit card. The manager's eyes widened, and he nodded emphatically. He shook Keanu's hand vigorously. There was a low buzz of conversation between them, and the manager typed something into the computer with a serious look on his face. When Keanu came back to the table, he didn't explain what he had done. He just said, "Ready to head out?" The veteran nodded, gathering his courage to face the rain again. They walked to the door, the bell chiming as they exited. The cold air hit them like a wall, instantly chilling the warmth they had built up. They stood under the small awning of the cafe. The veteran turned to Keanu to thank him, to express how much the meal meant. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That was the best meal I've had in I don't know how long." "You didn't have to do that." Keanu looked at him, his eyes filled with a deep kindness. "You're welcome," he said. "But we aren't done yet." He reached into his jacket pocket. The veteran thought maybe he was getting an autograph or maybe just a few dollars for the road. But Keanu pulled out a crisp, clean $100 bill. He took the veteran's hand. It was rough and calloused, and placed the money firmly into his palm, closing the veteran's fingers over it. "This is for you," Keanu said softly, making sure no one else could see the exchange. "Don't spend it all in one place. Get yourself a warm coat. Those boots look like they're letting in water. Get something solid. And if you have any left over, save it for a rainy day. Well, a rainier day." The veteran looked at the money in his hand. It was more than he had seen in a year. He looked up, shock written all over his face. I can't take this. It's too much." "You can, and you will," Keanu said firmly but with a smile. "You deserve it." Then Keanu leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "And that manager in there, he's a good guy. I paid for your meals for the rest of the month. You come back here for breakfast or dinner anytime you want. Just tell them your name. It's already taken care of. No need to dig for $1 next time." The veteran stood frozen, unable to speak. The unbelievable weight of what just happened crashed down on him. It wasn't just the $100. It wasn't just the full meal. It was the fact that he had a place to go tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. He had security. He had been seen, not as a charity case, but as a man worth investing in. The $1 request had unlocked a treasure chest of kindness he never expected. Before he could find the words to thank him properly, Keanu Reeves gave a quick nod, pulled his hood up against the drizzle, and turned to walk back into the flow of the city, leaving the veteran standing under the awning, clutching a warm cup of coffee and a promise for a better tomorrow. The rain started to come down harder, drumming a steady rhythm against the pavement, but the veteran standing under the small awning hardly felt it. He was still clutching the warm coffee cup in one hand and the crisp $100 bill in the other. He watched the figure in the dark jacket walk away, blending into the crowd of pedestrians until he was just another speck in the gray city landscape. For a long moment, the veteran didn't move. He just stood there, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. The cold air nipped at his nose, but a warm fire was burning inside his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just the caffeine or the money, it was the fact that he had been treated like a human being. He hadn't been ignored. He hadn't been brushed aside. He had been heard. He looked down at the money again. To most people, $100 isn't a life-changing amount. It might pay for a nice dinner or a pair of shoes. But to him, it was a fortune. It was safety. It was options. He carefully folded the bill and tucked it deep into the securest pocket inside his jacket, right next to his heart. He knew exactly what he needed to do. This wasn't money for pleasure, it was money for survival. Leaving the shelter of the cafe awning, he walked with a new sense of purpose. His stride was a little faster, his back a little straighter. He didn't shuffle his feet, he walked like he had somewhere important to be. A few blocks away, there was a small thrift store that sold second-hand military gear and used clothing. He headed there, his mind focused on the gear he needed to get through the winter. When he walked in, the bell rang, but unlike usual, he didn't feel the urge to hide in the back. He walked straight to the shoe section. He found a pair of sturdy, waterproof boots. They were used, a little scuffed, but the soles were thick and the leather was strong. He tried them on and wiggled his toes. For the first time in months, his feet felt dry and supported. Then he moved to the coats. He found a heavy wool coat, thick enough to block the wind, with a lining that would keep his body heat in. He took the items to the counter. The cashier looked at him, perhaps recognizing him from the neighborhood, but the veteran didn't look away in shame. He pulled out the crisp bill Keanu had given him and paid for his new gear. He even had enough left over to buy a warm pair of gloves and a sturdy backpack to carry his belongings. Walking out of the store wearing his new boots and coat, he felt like a different person. The biting wind that had tortured him earlier was now just a nuisance, not a threat. He felt armored against the world. But the physical warmth was only half of the miracle. The real change was happening inside his head. The next morning, the veteran woke up in the shelter. Usually, he would wake up with a sense of dread, wondering how he would get through the day, where his next meal would come from, and how he would survive the freezing night. But today was different. He remembered the actor's promise. He remembered the manager at the cafe. He packed his new backpack and headed out. The city was waking up, the sun trying to break through the clouds. When he arrived at the cafe, he paused at the door. He took a deep breath and walked in. The morning rush was on. People were grabbing coffees on their way to work. The veteran walked up to the counter, feeling a flash of his old anxiety. What if they forgot? What if it was a joke? The young woman who had served him the day before was working again. She looked up, saw him, and her face broke into a wide smile. "Good morning," she said loudly, not trying to hide his presence. "The usual, the large latte and the breakfast sandwich." The veteran nodded, stunned. "Yes, please. But I don't have any money left for the bill." The actor, the manager came out from the back. He was a big man with a kind face. He walked over to the veteran and extended a hand. "Don't worry about it," the manager said firmly. "Mr. Reeves took care of everything. He set up a tab for you for the rest of the month. You eat here as much as you want. No charge." The veteran felt his eyes water. He blinked rapidly to keep the tears back. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much. Enjoy your meal," the manager said, patting him on the shoulder. "Take a seat in the corner. It's quiet there." The veteran sat in the same spot he had sat in with Keanu. He ate his breakfast slowly. He watched the people coming and going. With a full stomach, warm clothes, and a safe place to come for meals, his mind began to clear. The fog of depression and desperation that had clouded his thoughts for years began to lift. He started thinking about the future, something he hadn't done in a long time. He remembered the VA center he had visited years ago and given up on because he felt too hopeless to keep trying. Now, he felt like he might have the strength to try again. Over the next few weeks, a change became noticeable to anyone who knew the streets. The veteran wasn't just sitting on a crate waiting for the day to end. He was going to the library, using the computers to look for housing programs. He was visiting the Veterans Affairs office, sitting through the meetings, filling out the forms. It was hard work. There were days he wanted to quit, days the bureaucracy was overwhelming. But on those days, he would go back to the cafe. The staff would greet him by name, give him a hot meal, and remind him that someone believed in him. He would look down at his boots, the boots that Keanu's kindness had bought, and remember that he was worth saving. The unbelievable result of that one request wasn't that a movie star gave him money. Money runs out eventually. The result was that the interaction broke the cycle of shame. When Keanu sat down with him, he told him, without speaking a word, that his life still had value. He showed him that he wasn't invisible. 2 months later, the veteran walked into the cafe with some news. He was clean-shaven, his hair was cut, and he looked healthy. He walked up to the manager. "I got a room," he said, his voice steady. "It's in a transitional housing complex. It's small, but it's warm. And I got a part-time job helping with maintenance at the warehouse down the street." The manager beamed at him. "That is wonderful news. I knew you could do it." "I couldn't have done it without the help," the veteran said. "And I want to pay for today's coffee. The first one is on me." The manager laughed and waved him away. "Your money is no good here. But I am proud of you." The story of the one request became a legend in that part of the city, not because of the fame involved, but because of what it represented. It proved that you never know what kind of battle someone is fighting just by looking at them. It showed that a small act of kindness, stopping for just 1 minute to acknowledge another person's existence, can change a life trajectory completely. As the winter turned to spring, the veteran would sometimes walk past the spot where he used to sit on his crate. He would remember the rainy afternoon when he asked for $1. He would think about the man who stopped, the man who didn't see a homeless beggar, but saw a brother in need. The veteran was back on his feet, not because he was handed a fortune, but because he was handed a ladder. And he had done the hard work of climbing it, one rung at a time, fueled by the memory of a warm meal and a shared moment of dignity. The result was truly unbelievable, not because it was magic, but because it was real.